Welcome back to the Tandem podcast. Today I have Jaze,
Jaze.
Jaze. Okay,
Uh,
Jaze Broadway Static, and he's been big with a lot of the BMW crowd, and I know you make a lot of coilovers for some of the other guys.
no.
Tell me a little about yourself and how you kind of got into the coilover game.
Oh man, so I've always been into low cars for a long, long, long time, man. I was actually like really into Hondas like in the late 90s, early 2000s. I'm from New York City, and that was kind of like the popular car that, everybody just modified. And so like I was never into like racing at that time or anything like that. I just wanted to be cool, to be honest with you. And I just started modifying my suspension kind of the crazy way, right? Like I started just chopping springs and going to the auto store, like figuring out what shocks were the smallest and all this other stuff. And I did that for a good long time. And then, people just started asking me like, "Hey man, can you make my car as low as yours?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." So like I used to go on eBay and I used to buy Skunk 2 lowering springs with the little sleeve on them, and we used to use like KGB AGX shocks, and we turned the damping up all the way on them, and we just kind of did dumb shit like that for a long time. And then I got out of the Honda game because my car got stolen, like pretty much every other Honda kid's car, right?
Yeah.
And I got into Volkswagens. That was my first like European car, and I had a neighbor at the time who his name is Greg, and he's Hardlines by Swoops right now. He was really into Volkswagens at the time, and he kind of just showed me like European suspensions and stuff like that, and that's what kind of like checked all my boxes, man. I enjoyed making these cars like really, really, really low. I enjoyed, having my subframe really like above the ground and not hitting it and things like that. And once again, I started doing a lot of shit for other people and blah blah blah. And then I decided to buy a fucking BMW. And then that's when I was introduced to like proper suspensions and things like that. Because I got on the forums and stuff, and I kind of brought my like younger vibe to it, right? Like low cars and whatever. And everybody fucking hated it, essentially. Everybody's like, "Oh my god, you're ruining the fucking cars," blah blah blah. So I made an effort to understand why people thought I was ruining cars and whatever it was. And from here to there, man, I called pretty much every suspension company because they all told me, right, you can get shocks that make your car ride amazingly. I never found them. So I just kept going around and around, man. I called all the major companies, man. Uh, and they would tell me I was crazy for just even like raising spring rates. I'm talking about like 4K. They'd be like, "Oh my God, your car's gonna ride terribly. If we shorten the shock like this, it's gonna be a nightmare for you. You're gonna hate it." And I just got really tired of that dumb shit, honestly. And I called Terry from Fortune Auto, and this was like, I mean, almost 10 years ago at this point. And he essentially let me do whatever I wanted to do. He was like, "Hey man, I don't know anything about BMW A and B about being low. So, I mean, whatever you want to do, you can just do it." And I did, and it worked, man. The shit really, really worked. So,
Yeah. I just recently last year picked up before my car blew up. Your coilovers, and I got
awesome.
a special set designed by like what I wanted because I want to be super low, and but I still want to because I'm gonna drift it. I want to be able to actually drive it hard and
Right.
still have the drivability of it. And like I've drove cars and I've had competitors equip like suspension, and it's like night and day difference whenever you get like the
Thanks, man.
perfect because when you get the perfect set of coilovers that are designed for your spring rates, it makes one world of difference. Because I know a lot of
Awesome.
competitors out there will um, um, take their off the shelf and just change their spring rates and call it
Right.
good.
And call it
And
custom too.
yeah, and that seems to be like the kind of thing that gets overlooked whenever you talk about spring rates, because a lot of the times nobody really thinks about it, but the dampening rates change, and with
Right.
they have to change with the spring rate.
Oh, big time, big time. And at the time, even when we first started, like people weren't really like aware of like spring rates and like how things are valved. You know, at least not how we're familiar with it today, right? Where like now I would say like 9 out of 10 people who actually call me, they're like, hey man, I wrote on this spring rate and I really liked it, but I want to tweak it just a little bit. And that really wasn't the case in the beginning, man. Like it was just more like, oh, this is stiff, this is too hard. So I'm glad that people are not only being more educated about their suspension, but I'm glad to just be just like a small bit of it, man. Like I enjoy when people get the same understanding and the same like aha moments that I got when I was coming
Yeah,
about. I love seeing that. And like when I see like information click, I mean, I love it.
yeah, because it seems like a lot of times out there, like suspension, especially when it comes to coilovers, it's all kind of witchcraft, because a lot of the
It
people will
is,
just
man.
they'll just buy whatever's off the shelf, and oh, this is riding a little stiff, just turn up the dampeners.
Right.
But that really doesn't change. I mean, from what I've known is that really isn't the case. What you need to do, I mean, you need to look at it of how you're going to be driving it, what you need to be putting
Mhm.
into it, how low you're going to be. Because I know if you're setting up a car, and especially with the different ways adjustables, because I
Right.
know you're what's it, the V2s or V V2s, or is it
We've got
V3s now?
we've got 500s, we've got V2s, and we have V2 race. So they all kind of
Okay.
accomplish somewhat different things. You know,
Yeah.
500 kind of like the all around. It's like a nice like iPhone 8, right?
Yeah.
It's the classic thing, which what everybody's used to. It's a classic formula. Then we have the V2, which is like a step up from the 500. So it's gonna have like Heim joints everywhere. It's gonna have like no rubber. The
Yeah.
valve is a little bit more specific. When I mean specific is like people usually call and they tell me they I've got like a 335, right? An E90, I make 600 horsepower. I've got this transmission in it. I've got this. And we tweak everything with our experience with these cars to, get it close to there. And then the V2 race is kind of like our all out one way, like motorsport grade shock. That's just like the best we can do with the best of everything we have in house.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of the times that people see is like they'll get coilovers and not realize it's a single adjustable coilover versus
Right.
dual adjustable. I mean, and then some people just don't realize like the fact of like setting how to set dampening correctly and
Oh,
whatnot, and
man.
it's just kind of this like thing that just people get and never really think about like what they're buying, or they just see like the brand name, or hey, this guy runs
Oh,
it, and
yeah.
it's it's what
Yeah.
they run.
And one thing that I tell people all the time is that, I mean, I don't want to give a random number, right? Because I feel like people, when they give like random percentages, it's just bullshit. But a vast majority of people don't realize that that not only me, but everybody else in the suspension, we make a tool, right? And the tool is only as good as the person who's swinging it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So like I tell people all the time, like I could give you, a shock from Penske that came off of an F1 car, and I'll beat you around the track with a Raceland because I know how to set it up, you know? So
yeah,
we could give you a four-way shock that does all of this adjustment, but if you don't know what all those dials are doing, you're gonna fuck something up, man. And it's
yeah,
probably gonna be a lot worse than if
and
you just got a one-way shock and just ran with it. Not everybody needs a two, three, and four-way shock, man. And I
yeah,
tell this
oh
to a
yeah,
lot of people.
and that's how like I kind of got to when I ordered your stuff. I was like, all right, I know what I want, and I know that I want to go low, so I've ran different spring rates in the past, especially with drifting, especially drifting a low car, like,
Right.
and if you're driving hard on a low car, you're using that full travel of
Oof,
the shock.
big time.
So you want to up that spring rate to remain low without like completely turning your roll center off of your car.
Right.
And like when I did it the first time, I was like, all right, I went with one of your competitors, and
Mm-hmm.
I think I went up 2K in spring rates, and I realized that my car was still rolling super heavy, and
Right.
the only thing I could do was turn the dampening all the way hard,
Mm-hmm.
and I quickly regretted why I bought those coilovers. But back then, um, a lot of the science behind uh, like picking the right shock or
Yeah.
coilover
Just wasn't
was,
there.
yeah. And now that we've gotten to this day, I think there's a little more education and people kind of look more and into what goes into a good coilover and
Absolutely.
um,
And I'm pretty
what's
sure
going to
I
make a
I'm pretty
handle
sure I had
last.
the same brand you're talking about. Me and Chaz were talking about it yesterday, but a lot of people go through this one popular brand, and listen, for the price that it costs, it's pretty good, right? It's pretty good.
Yeah,
Um,
it wasn't horrible, but um, it didn't give me it where my ride height was, or sorry, where my ride height was. It wasn't
mhm,
giving me the correct feedback I wanted. And if I wanted to get the
right,
proper feedback from the car, I would have had to raise it, which I didn't want to do.
right, bingo. So and I went through the same exact thing, man. At a certain point, the point that I got to there was I had this car. It was an E36 BMW. It had a one Jaze in it. I was making like five something hundred horsepower. It was completely built bottom end, big turbo and all this other stuff. And everybody was just telling me to get 8K in the front and 10K in the rear for my E36, which is just normal stuff. That's like off the shelf stuff. Even though I was running, I was tucking an 18-inch wheel on my car. Um, it was just terrible, dude. It was just unreally terrible. I mean, I couldn't even go down the street without completely tearing apart my lips, hitting my fenders, and all this other stuff. So once we started stiffening them up, and not just stiffening them up, but actually riding in the car after you did even incremental changes over and over and over again. Like I tell people, like, we're about 8.5 years in business, about 9.5 years in development. But those first couple of years were brutal, man. They were brutal. Like we had to essentially do the smallest of all changes to the car and just go drive around, beat it up, spend money, burn tires on it, and see what we got. And then we would have to take all that stuff down to from New York City down to Virginia to where a Fortunato was, and then try to prove it on a shock dyno. So when it comes to like those E36s, E46s, E30s, and E90s, E-chassis BMWs, man, I don't know if anybody's done as much dumb shit to those cars as we have. Like the true coilover, there's a couple of people who are actually like just coming out with a true coilover, and some people were like amazed by it, right? They were just like, oh my God, I can't believe there's a true coilover. I mean, I've had a true coilover since 2012. I think
Yeah,
Chaz has had a true coilover since like 2013 or 2014 or something like that, too.
yeah, yeah. I went with the true coilover,
All right.
and um,
Kind of
it's
nice, right?
yeah, it's definitely kind of cool to see that, and um, it's definitely a little bit of a weight savings. Plus, it's a little more easy for repairs if we need to,
Right.
or just whatnot. And um,
And what do you
it's
think
kind of
about ease of adjustment? Do you think it's a little bit easier to actually adjust height than the spring separate from the shock?
yeah, because I with the other one that's with the competitor
Mhm.
because I wanted to go so low. The problem with um, the spring was is I put it in the because on the E36 when I had one,
Mhm.
the spring goes into one of the arms that goes into the trail or one of your trailing arms
Yep.
into the bottom side of the subframe or the body or whatever it is.
Mhm.
The problem with that is the spring is that they sent at that certain uh, stiffness was a certain length,
Right.
and I removed the collar from it for the adjustability, and I was maxed. With your coilover with the E46 that I noticed was I have it I have the spring in there where Fortune Auto said to set it, which
Hmm.
was very nice to see that um, it shows you how to preload it.
Right.
And most other companies don't tell you that you need to preload a spring to get the desired uh,
Right.
balance off it. And another thing that was nice was I had, because it was the in body and I was doing a true coilover on the rear,
Hmm.
I almost had to take, I have the coilover actually on the farthest setting. So if I wanted to go lower, I actually can.
Nice.
And with this, it just makes it a lot easier. And I knew what I wanted. And after
Hmm.
you do it once, you realize. And another
Right.
thing that was really nice is I knew that uh, the coilover is set up for my car, for my spring rate, and for my ride height, which was
For sure.
amazing. Because and then you get that full length of travel, which with that one with yours, I noticed. I mean, it's not a lot of travel, but with that spring rate, it's gonna be the desired travel that spring needs.
Oh, right, for sure.